Hello, welcome to Exobiography's channel. Today we shall discuss top 7 mysterious extraterrestrial encounters from last century.
Phoenix Lights. The Phoenix Lights were a mass UFO sighting which occurred in Phoenix, Arizona, and Sonora, Mexico on Thursday, March 13, 1997. Lights of varying descriptions were reported by thousands of people between 1930 and 2230 Mountain Standard Time, in a space of about 300 miles, from the Nevada line, through Phoenix, to the edge of Tucson. There were allegedly 2 distinct events involved in the incident: a triangular formation of lights seen to pass over the state, and a series of stationary lights seen in the Phoenix area. The United States Air Force later identified the second group of lights as flares dropped by A-10 Warthog aircraft that were on training exercises at the Berry Goldwater Range in southwest Arizona. Witnesses claim to have observed a huge V-shaped, several football field-sized, coherently moving dark UFO. Stars would disappear behind the object and reappear as it passed by, producing no sound, and containing 5 spherical lights or possibly light-emitting engines. Lights were also reportedly seen in the areas of Prescott and Prescott Valley. At approximately 8:17 Mountain Standard Time, callers began reporting the object was definitely solid, because it blocked out much of the starry sky as it passed over. At the town of Dewey, 10 miles east of Prescott, Arizona, 6 people saw a large cluster of lights while driving northbound on Highway 69. Eventually, when the lights appeared to be a couple of miles away, the witnesses could make out a shape that looked like a 60-degree carpenter's square with the 5 lights set into it, with 1 at the front and 2 on each side. Soon the object with the embedded lights appeared to be coming right down the street where they lived, about 100 to 150 feet above them, traveling so slowly it appeared to hover and was silent. The object then seemed to pass over their heads and went through a V opening in the peaks of the mountain range towards Piestewa Peak and toward the direction of Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport.
Number 6. Virginia Incident. Virginia UFO Incident is the name given to a series of events involving the alleged sighting and capture by the military of an extraterrestrial being in Virginia, Brazil, in 1996. Such reports were first broadcast on the Sunday TV show Fantástico of Rede Globo and gathered media coverage worldwide, including an article in the Wall Street Journal. It has since become a well-known case in modern Brazilian ufology. The Brazilian government has officially denied any claims of being involved in the capture of extraterrestrial biological entities, but some theorists claim otherwise, accusing the government of a cover-up. The creature was first sighted by 3 women ranging from 14 to 22 years old, sisters Liliane and Valkyria Fatima Silva, and their friend Katia Andrade Xavier. They allegedly saw the creature in the afternoon of January 20, 1996, a biped about 1.6 meters, 5 feet, with a large head and very thin body, with V-shaped feet, brown skin, and large red eyes. It seemed to be wobbly or unsteady, and the girls assumed it was injured or sick. The Silva sisters said they fled and told mother they had seen the devil. The woman did not believe them up until she went to the area where they had allegedly seen the creature and smelled a strong ammonia-like odor and found nothing but its footsteps and a dog sniffing the place. After relating their tale to family and friends, rumors began to spread throughout the city regarding UFO sightings and alien creatures being abducted by the military forces. 2 days later, another creature was allegedly found lying along a road. 3 military trucks were supposedly sent to retrieve it. A similar creature was reportedly seen at the local zoo by its janitor. The following months, 3 animals mysteriously died. Number 5.
Washington DC UFO flight.
It was around 11:40 p.m. on Saturday night, July 19, 1952. Air traffic controller Edward Nugent was at his radar screen at Washington National Airport in Washington, D.C., when he saw 7 unusual blips on the screen. No known aircraft were in the area and there was no explanation for the presence of the objects. Nugent called his superior, Harry Barnes, to come and look. Together, they watched the mysterious objects dart across the sky. They even checked to make sure the radar was working properly. Nugent and his boss checked with the control tower and learned that both controllers in the tower had also seen the blips. They called nearby Andrews Air Force Base, where controllers also saw strange objects on their radar screens. 2 of the objects clearly hovered over the White House, with another one over the Capitol. Controllers at both airports began tracking the objects, which they estimated to be traveling at about 130 miles per hour when they suddenly disappeared from the radar screen. Then appeared again, zipping all around the sky. One made a 90-degree turn and another one suddenly went in reverse, both maneuvers that American airplanes could not make at the time. An airline captain, S.C. Pierman, was waiting on the tarmac in the cockpit of his DC-4 at National Airport for authorization to take off. While waiting, he saw 6 objects moving about the sky. Over a 14-minute time period, Pierman would see the objects and then they would disappear, reappearing moments later. He was talking to Controller Barnes this entire time. Every time Pierman reported a sighting, a blip appeared on Barnes's radar screen. At 5:30 a.m. on Sunday morning, July 20th, the objects disappeared entirely. Were these really unidentified flying objects, UFOs? Did they come back again on another day for a second look? What was the significance of the 1952 UFO sightings and how did the sightings become known as the Great UFO Flap of 1952? The objects return on July 26, 1952. At around 8:15 p.m. 1 week later, a stewardess and a captain were on an inbound flight into Washington National Airport. They observed strange lights above their plane. At the same time, an officer at Andrews Air Force Base also observed the objects. Other pilots in the air at the time saw them, too. Similar to the occurrence from the week before, the encore performance of the UFOs ended around dawn on Sunday morning. The objects disappeared from sight and off of the airport radar. The government created Project Blue Book to scientifically investigate all reported UFO sightings and relevant data to determine if they posed a threat to national security, which they terminated in January 1970. During its time in existence, from 1952 to 1970, it investigated 12,618 UFO reports. It found most of the occurrences coincided with natural phenomena. Only a handful remained unexplained. Number 4. Roswell Crash, 1947. The Roswell UFO incident took place in the U.S. in June or July 1947, when an airborne object crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico. The most famous explanation of what occurred is that the object was a spacecraft containing extraterrestrial life. The United States Armed Forces maintains that what was recovered near Roswell was debris from the crash of an experimental high-altitude surveillance balloon belonging to what was then a classified, top-secret, program named Mogul. In contrast, many UFO proponents maintain that an alien craft was found, its occupants were captured, and that the military engaged in a massive cover-up. On July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield (RAAF) Public Information Officer Walter Oates issued a press release stating that personnel from the field's 509th Operations Group had recovered a flying disc, which had crashed on a ranch near Roswell. Later that day, the press reported that Commanding General of the 8th Air Force Roger Ramey had stated that a weather balloon was recovered by the RAAF personnel. A press conference was held, featuring debris, foil, rubber, and wood, said to be from the crashed object, which seemed to confirm its description as a weather balloon. In 1978, nuclear physicist and author Stanton T. Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel, the only person known to have accompanied the Roswell debris from where it was recovered to Fort Worth, where reporters saw material which was claimed to be part of the recovered object. The accounts given by Friedman and others in the following years elevated Roswell from a forgotten incident to perhaps the most famous UFO case of all time. By the early 1990s, UFO researchers such as Friedman, William Moore, Carl T. Plock, and the team of Kevin D. Randall and Donald R. Schmidt interviewed several hundred people who had, or claimed to have had, a connection with the events at Roswell in 1947. Additionally, hundreds of documents were obtained via Freedom of Information Act requests, and some were supposedly leaked by insiders, such as the so-called Majestic 12 papers. Their conclusions were at least one alien craft had crashed in the Roswell vicinity, aliens, some possibly still alive, were recovered, and a massive cover-up of any knowledge of the incident was put in place. In 1995, film footage purporting to show an alien autopsy and claimed to have been taken by a U.S. military official shortly after the Roswell incident was released by Ray Santilli, a London-based video entrepreneur. The footage caused an international sensation when it aired on television networks around the world. In 2006, Santilli admitted that the film was mostly a reconstruction, but continued to claim it was based on genuine footage now lost, and some original frames that had survived. A fictionalized version of the creation of the footage and its release was retold in the comedy film Alien Autopsy, 2006. Number 3. Modern UFO Phenomenon. The modern UFO mystery has 3 traceable routes: the late 19th century mystery airships reported in the newspapers of western United States, Foo Fighters reported by Allied airmen during World War II, and the Kenneth Arnold flying saucer sighting near Mount Rainier, Washington on June 24, 1947. UFO reports between the Great Airship Wave and the Arnold sighting were limited in number compared to the post-war period. Notable cases include reports of ghost flyers in Europe and North America during the 1930s and the numerous reports of ghost rockets in Scandinavia, mostly Sweden, from May to December 1946. The Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting occurred on June 24, 1947, when private pilot Kenneth Arnold claimed that he saw a string of 9 shiny unidentified flying objects flying past Mount Rainier at speeds that Arnold estimated at a minimum of 1,200 miles an hour. This was the first post-war sighting in the United States that garnered nationwide news coverage and is credited with being the first of the modern era of UFO sightings, including numerous reported sightings over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Arnold's description of the objects also led to the press quickly coining the terms flying saucer and flying disc as popular descriptive terms for UFOs. On June 24, 1947, Arnold was flying from Chehalis, Washington to Yakima, Washington in a Colair A2 on a business trip. He made a brief detour after learning of a $5,000 reward for the discovery of a U.S. Marine Corps C-46 transport airplane that had crashed near Mount Rainier. The skies were completely clear and there was a mild wind. A few minutes before 3 p.m. at about 9,200 feet in altitude and near Mineral, Washington, he gave up his search and started heading eastward towards Yakima. He saw a bright flashing light, similar to sunlight reflecting from a mirror. Afraid he might be dangerously close to another aircraft, Arnold scanned the skies around him, but all he could see was a DC-4 to his left and behind him, about 15 miles away. About 30 seconds after seeing the first flash of light, Arnold saw a series of bright flashes in the distance off to his left, or north of Mount Rainier, which was then 20 to 25 miles away. He thought they might be reflections on his airplane's windows, but a few quick tests, rocking his airplane from side to side, removing his eyeglasses, later rolling down his side window, ruled this out. The reflections came from flying objects. They flew in a long chain, and Arnold for a moment considered they might be a flock of geese, but quickly ruled this out for a number of reasons, including the altitude, bright glint, and obviously very fast speed. He then thought they might be a new type of jet and started looking intently for a tail and was surprised that he couldn't find any. They quickly approached Rainier and then passed in front, usually appearing dark in profile against the bright white snowfield covering Rainier, but occasionally still giving off bright light flashes as they flipped around erratically. Sometimes he said he could see them on edge, when they seemed so thin and flat they were practically invisible. According to Jerome Clark, Arnold described them as a series of objects with convex shapes, though he later revealed that one object differed by being crescent-shaped. Several years later, Arnold would state he likened their movement to saucers skipping on water, without comparing their actual shapes to saucers, but initial quotes from him do indeed have him comparing the shape to like a saucer, disc, pie pan, or half-moon, or generally convex and thin. At one point Arnold said they flew behind a subpeak of Rainier and briefly disappeared. Knowing his position and the position of the unspecified subpeak, Arnold placed their distance as they flew past Rainier at about 23 miles. As the objects passed Mount Rainier, Arnold turned his plane southward on a more or less parallel course. It was at this point that he opened his side window and began observing the objects unobstructed by any glass that might have produced reflections. The objects did not disappear and continued to move very rapidly southward, continuously moving forward of his position. Curious about their speed, he began to time their rate of passage. He said they moved from Mount Rainier to Mount Adams, where they faded from view, a distance of about 50 miles, in 1 minute and 42 seconds, according to the clock on his instrument panel. When he later had time to do the calculation, the speed was over 1,700 miles per hour. This was about 3 times faster than any manned aircraft in 1947. Not knowing exactly the distance where the objects faded from view, Arnold conservatively and arbitrarily rounded this down to 1,200 miles an hour, still faster than any known aircraft, which had yet to break the sound barrier. It was this supersonic speed in addition to the unusual saucer or disc description that seemed to capture people's attention. His sighting was a sensation at the outbreak of the Cold War, when tensions between the USSR and USA were quickly escalating. People wondered if Arnold had seen Soviet remote-controlled missiles or some new U.S. weapon being secretly tested. Speculation was rife, but no one then, or since, has come up with the ultimate explanation for his sighting. The inability to find a satisfying explanation led to thoughts that these newfangled flying saucers were being controlled by extraterrestrial aliens. As time has passed, the term flying saucer has been supplanted by the more scientific term unidentified flying object, UFO, or unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. Number 2. Battle for Los Angeles. On the night of February 24, 1942, the air raid sirens sounded, and the Coast Guard anti-aircraft guns were ordered to green alert, putting them in readiness to fire. From the time the battle began until it ended in the early hours of the morning, thousands of people had witnessed the searchlights around Los Angeles fix on a target hovering above the city, and anti-aircraft rounds detonate in the sky. Reputable news agencies reported the attack, complete with eyewitness accounts. But the Japanese claim that they never attacked, and there was no wreckage to indicate that anyone actually did. These conflicting accounts cast uncertainty on the nature of the unidentified aircraft that caused the Battle of Los Angeles. The first sightings of the incoming aircraft came from the Coast Guard shortly after 11 p.m. Because commercial and private aircraft were fairly common, the Civil Defense Service reacted cautiously to the initial sighting. As reports of the incoming plane, or sometimes fleet, continued and progressed nearer to land, artillery posts were put on alert. By the time they started getting reports of an overhead object from people inland, things were put into action, and the air raid wardens were called in to put the city into blackout. Thousands of volunteer air raid wardens began calling the homes of people in their areas and ordering them to douse the lights. In so doing, they incited people to go out and seek the object that was crawling slowly through the sky. Some witness accounts described the interloper above the city as a tremendous single object, while others stated that it was a dispersed group of smaller objects. Many people reported to the papers that they were certain they'd seen U.S. planes approach the object before the shelling began. However, the Army reported that 4th Interceptor Command was only on alert, and no planes were ever launched. Spotlights lit the skies and illuminated an object moving slowly, sometimes hovering. At 3:16 a.m. the 37th Coast Guard Artillery Brigade opened fire while the target was over Culver City. With the city lights all snuffed for the blackout, the barrage of AA shells was the center of attention. The firing continued intermittently through the night until the blackout lifted at 7:21 a.m. The morning papers were filled with details of the incident. Some reported that 2 Japanese airplanes had been shot down, but such wreckage was never found. Some buildings had been damaged by shells, and there were 6 casualties, all of them were on the ground. There were 3 killed by friendly fire and 3 more of stress induced by the attack. The Los Angeles Times ran a front-page picture depicting the object caught in the searchlights. It is uncertain if this picture is an actual photograph or an artist's depiction because of the lack of clarity, i.e. the fact the searchlights terminate on the object rather than cast streams past. The Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, immediately denounced accounts of the affair, calling it a false alarm brought about by war nerves. Since the battle, many have proposed that the mysterious object that was seen moving over Santa Monica to Long Beach was a weather balloon, or perhaps an early Japanese fire balloon. However, to suggest that the Coast Guard commenced firing at a balloon for over an hour implies a degree of incompetence, to say the least. There are others who have a less pedestrian explanation for that night, that it was a mass close encounter of the first kind. Rumors circulated that 2 downed aircraft were found, one in the sea and one in the San Bernardino Mountains, and that they were of obvious extraterrestrial origin. But these incredible claims are not accompanied by credible evidence. The variation in personal accounts contribute little to the solving of this mystery. Some saw one large object in the sky, some saw many smaller objects. Reports on the object's altitude ranged significantly. However, it seems certain that there was something in the sky that night because despite the disparity in the reports, the fact that there were tens of thousands of witnesses make the existence of the object over LA that night impossible to dismiss entirely.
Number 1. Tunguska Blast. On June 30, 1908, at around 7:17 local time, Evenki natives and Russian settlers in the hills northwest of Lake Baikal observed a column of bluish light, nearly as bright as the sun, moving across the sky. About 10 minutes later, there was a flash and a sound similar to artillery fire. Eyewitnesses closer to the explosion reported that the source of the sound moved from the east to the north of them. The sounds were accompanied by a shock wave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows hundreds of kilometers away. The majority of witnesses reported only the sounds and tremors, and did not report seeing the explosion. The Tunguska event was a large explosion that occurred near the stony Tunguska River in Yeniseisk Governorate, Russia, on the morning of June 30, 1908. The explosion over the sparsely populated eastern Siberian taiga flattened 2,000 square kilometers of forest, yet caused no known human casualties. The explosion is generally attributed to the airburst of a meteoroid. It is classified as an impact event, even though no impact crater has been found. The object is thought to have disintegrated at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers rather than to have hit the surface of the Earth. The Tunguska event is the largest impact event on Earth in recorded history. Studies have yielded different estimates of the meteoroid's size, on the order of 60 to 190 meters, depending on whether the body was a comet or a denser asteroid. Early estimates of the energy of the airburst range from 10 to 15 megatons of TNT to 30 megatons of TNT, depending on the exact height of burst estimated when the scaling laws from the effects of nuclear weapons are employed. However, modern supercomputer calculations that include the effect of the object's momentum find that more of the energy was focused downward than would be the case from a nuclear explosion and estimate that the airburst had an energy range from 3 to 5 megatons of TNT. The 15 megaton (MT) estimate represents an energy about 1,000 times greater than that of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, Japan, roughly equal to that of the United States Castle Bravo ground-based thermonuclear detonation on March 1, 1954, and about one-third that of the Soviet Union's Tsar Bomba explosion on October 30, 1961, which, at 50 metric tons, is the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated. It is estimated that the Tunguska explosion knocked down some 80 million trees over an area of 2,150 square kilometers, and that the shock wave from the blast would have measured 5.0 on the Richter magnitude scale. An explosion of this magnitude would be capable of destroying a large metropolitan area, but, due to the remoteness of the location, no human fatalities were officially documented. Several reports have indicated that 2 people may have died in the event, however, these deaths remain unofficial.